Alright, here's what I'm up to today. Finishing in well, not finishing in, but doing the drywall on my third kid's bedroom. Um, there used to be a shoe closet on the opposite side of this wall. And then right here on the other side in the dining room, there's a curio cabinet, like a china cabinet. And what I'm doing is reclaiming that space into this room because nobody uses them old bifold doors with the, coat closet. Nobody really does that, at least I don't, especially not in a common space. So this will be a closet. It's not necessarily a walk-in, but it's enough space to hang stuff, put shoes in here. There'll be a shelf up top and stuff. Drywall's not my favorite thing to do either, but it'll look good once it's done. And over here, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave the floor at this level of this 2x4 and just go that way with a piece of plywood. And then I'm gonna frame this out for shelving. And so right behind her door will be a bunch of shelving right here. And then it's gonna stop at the top, and all that'll be closed in up top. And that'll be pretty neat, actual like little shoe shelf thing. I really need to find my gimbal because this whole flipping the phone around thing ain't working good for me. Wanted to show off my crappy drywall work here. Some of this is because the house isn't square, and then when this was demoed, these panels actually fell down. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to spray a little popcorn and then use a sponge and try and get a little bit of the sponge look back in there. I'm gonna show the other closet I did in the adjacent room because I think I'm gonna do something different. I think I'm gonna go with like the floor molding. I'm gonna go with that like thicker 1-inch 1x3 or whatever. I'm gonna go around the bottom, and what that's gonna do is in the corner, it's gonna leave me a flat landing where I can take a piece of corner trim and it won't look so bad meeting that board. And then I'll probably just go all the way up instead of trying to mud this in. Because in the other room, I actually mudded that in. And show that. So this is one of the rooms we finished. And it's not like perfect, but it's good enough. But you can see I mudded in the corners. And I'm gonna do something different where, the same where I have a light here on a switch on the outside. And this room's done. It's just we never got around to doing the molding in the room itself. So, but what I'll do is I'll shift this programmable LEDs up into the corner, and then what I want to do is find some like composite or like something that's like frosty but will diffuse the light and still let a lot of it through, and use that behind the molding and put some molding over it, and that way that light's still going to shine down and look really cool. But this is the flooring, and this is just cheap Lowe's flooring. I figured once the kids are out of the house years from now, we'll probably redo the flooring with some actual good wood flooring. You can see we made her a little nook here. I believe her grandmother made her that little makeup desk there, which is nice. I decided I'm gonna go ahead and put up the ceiling fan, and I want to take a minute to show you this. So here's your ground. This is your neutral. Your neutral's usually safe to touch because it's ties back into the grounding lug back in your panel or an earth ground depending on your setup. But if you see a wire like this, typically someone has marked this wire because it's gone to the switch. And so the original light was tied in here with an extension and here. So that tells me when you turn on the switch, it turns this on, and that there's a second one because it's going to the adjacent room, because this used to be one big connected like studio. It was like a record room and stuff. It was kind of neat, but it's way outdated. Now, normally you're like trying to find your hot, right? And you should be using a voltage probe. I've got a few of them. I don't know where they're at right now, so I'm just going to use this to find, well, to make sure I have the correct hot coming in. And I'm going to eliminate one of these wires because it goes to the other room, and I'm going to wire that separately. Because right now they're all on one switch. Unless the hot comes in here, I might just move the hot leg over, and that'll tie me into the other room, because I think they still, yeah, they still share a circuit. And then over here, the right here is where the light will go on the other side in the closet. And so I have my wires ready for that, and then the switch is going to be right here, and then it's going in here, and it's going to tie into a curio cabinet because that's on the same circuit. And then I'm going to add a plug down here because, you know, teenagers, they need all the plugs they can get. So I'm going to go ahead and untwist these without touching the bare wire. I don't have to undo the neutral, but I'm going to anyway. And, you know, this is 120 volts, North America. You can, most people, especially if you're not in small in stature, you can handle a little shock from 120, but you should never do it, honestly, because you can end up having cardiac arrest and other complications from it. It's not something to be played with, so you should be using a high voltage detector. And what I'm going to do is use this Sperry light bulb tester thingy, and I'm going to see which one makes it light up. I think I have the switch cut off currently, so let's go cut the switch on. It's already on. Okay, one of those are definitely hot right now because I already had the light hooked up earlier. So let's find the hot. Should have known it wasn't that one because that's the switch one. This is the one going to the switch. So this one is going into that in there. I don't know if you can see that. It's going into right there, which means it's the switched hot, and then it comes back out here, and that's what was tying into the light. So this is probably the light to the other room, which means that this is probably hot and the neutral coming in. So I'm gonna connect to it. And here we go. So I know that we're good to use that as our hot. So I'm gonna fold those over. Should leave this connected really, because you want to make sure that when you switch it off, there's nothing coming through there. That way you can work with it safely. And you know, the best advice is to find a breaker, but it's not really solid advice in my opinion, mainly because the older houses, which is mostly what people are working on, because if it's a new construction, an electrician's doing it. So if you're working on an old house, a lot of times the breakers aren't labeled right or anything anyway, so you shouldn't trust that anyway. So you should always pick you up like one of these deals. You plug it into the plug so you can see when your breaker's off. Now, I have a lot of experience in electrical, so I'm gonna leave that hot and work around it. But by all means, do not take my advice on that, or don't follow my example, I should say, because that is a bad advice. So don't do it. So yeah, so now I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep the hot, because from what I remember in the adjacent room, I ran a switch and I already ran it up to where I can reach it when I go to wire her light separately. So it's gonna need a hot and a neutral. So we're gonna leave that in there, tie it into the permanent hot neutral coming in, which is this one. And then we're going to tie in the switch for only the light in this room, which is a nice little electric fan with a remote control and all that for her. All right, so got it all wired up here, and we're going to test our switch, make sure get it right. And there you go, working. But I did find something else I wanted to point out because it's a good little example of what not to do, I guess. This wire nut is a little undersized. I like these. They have a little extra on them to kind of protect it, especially with the hot. But anytime dealing with more than 2 conductors, I always do a little test after I twist them to see if there's any loose wires. But check this out. Bam, see that? That's why you're supposed to do that. So what I'm gonna do, undo this mess, and I'm gonna get a proper wire nut, and then I'll probably even put a little bit of tape on there, and we'll be all set. But this is your hot coming back from the switch. This is the neutral. I went ahead and put the extension back on there because it's already a bunch of conductors. And we will be set after I get a good wire nut on here and get it up there. All right, all set. That is not going anywhere. And it looks good enough. I'm not even going to put any tape on there. All right, I got the mount up, and I use oversized screws because I don't trust the little dinky screws that come with these. I trimmed this one back. It was too long. Don't leave them real long, because you shouldn't really have any bare wire protruding out the back of these whenever you have them on there. And I went ahead and put some black tape on here, even though it's already marked, just in case for the next person. I was curious about something. We have a pretty clean power here, so it's right at 120 volts. This is a Chinese fan, and well, you know, most of them are, but this one doesn't scream quality or anything. And it has a high input voltage range. And it's rated for 18 watts. So the amperage should be like 120 volts divided by 18. I'm at 0.12 amps just for the light. I'm gonna see if I can't turn the fan on. If I get my camera adjusted here. Cooperate. Let's see here. Whoop, bad idea. Bad idea. All off. Ooh. Finally, with the closet here. Taking me some getting used to using this gimbal again. But it should be a little bit more steady. You can see the stuff I've done here. And you know, the first amount of spackle you put down is really just for the base, you know, building it up. So we'll knock it back down and then put another coat. And if I did it right, it only has to do one more coat, but it might take more in some of these trouble spots. So I guess we'll see. Got the ceiling fan going, feels pretty good. So what I'm gonna do is, if this gimbal will cooperate, and it will not, apparently. It'll zoom way in, but don't seem to be capturing my wider angle camera. But I'm gonna do a section at a time and then do some spackle and keep doing it that way. And then, you know, by the time I get to the last section over here, I'll be able to sand on the closet and then, you know, keep going. All right, got the closet light wired in. Figure I'd show real quick. So right here, I'm using 14-2, so there's 3 conductors. This would normally be a neutral, this would be hot. Here's your ground. I'm using it as a switch, so of course we need to mark our neutral. So if anybody comes there in the future, they'll know, hey, this might be carrying voltage. And it should be obvious for an electrician, but you know, for someone else, I like to do that. And then I'll have that one capped and have wire tape around it. and have that ready to go with a new workbox, because there's not going to be a receptacle. It actually goes inside of the light fixture, and there's wire nuts in there, so you don't have to have an enclosed gang box like we have here. And typically, if I'm running wire, I leave slack myself. Electricians do not typically leave slack, a lot of it, but I like to have nice open radiuses, lots of extra wire in case in the future I want to replace a plug or something and trim the conductors back. All you gotta do is trim the sheathing, trim the conductor. And I also normally do this if there's room in here. And these are the deeper boxes, so I'll do a little, nice little 90-degree bend and then push it in there. And then if this gets caught or something and you need to change the switch in the future, you have a little extra wire in there. And then you'll notice I didn't trim these any more than what I needed to, right? No exposed wire. And then the ground, I usually stick it in one of these loopholes, and I try to twist it in the same direction that you're going to be tightening. So if, you know, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, when you're tightening around, you want to pull the wire a little bit snug as you're tightening around. If you wrap it around the opposite direction, it actually pushes the wire out, and you end up, and I see it all the time when I go back behind other people, but they'll wire this stuff up, and then there's too much, like they've trimmed it back too much, and then they wrapped it around the wrong direction, and then when they tightened it, it kind of pushed it out even more, which is not good. So that's how I do it normally. Again, you know, I've just been doing electrical all my life. I could do could get certified in this state, but I don't do it for a living. So, and again, you know, take my advice with a grain of salt. I'm just showing you how I do it. I'm not telling you to go out and do this stuff this way. So, full disclaimer, don't go and burn your house down trying to do electrical if you don't know what you're doing. Okay, progress. Now this is what it looks like when I mud a corner and I do it right the first time. I should be able to get away with one sand there because the paint is going to fill in a lot of stuff. Like if you do end up doing something, it'll be like where the screws are. But the corner itself looks pretty good. They make the little aluminum L channel things you put in the corner. I've never liked those. And my odd cuts usually end up in the corner, so you don't have that pressed edge here. If you don't know, drywall is actually compressed on the edges, and it helps it from falling apart. But this is the part where you put like I'm using fiberglass tape, but most of the drywall guys will use the paper tape that doesn't have anything sticky to it, and it's just such a pain. I've never been good at using that, but I'll be able to put this here like we did over here and mud everything in. And that's mainly, this is just to reinforce it to keep it from cracking, and also kind of helps like keep your mud from sinking into the crack and have to use more material. Now this wall is framed on what we call 16, where the studs all fall on 16 inches. And if you do the math, you know, you've got a 4-foot piece of drywall. It should land it should still land where it's supposed to without you having to trim. Problem is, this room on both walls, I'm in the middle of a stud, and so if you start in either direction of the wall, you're gonna have to trim something because it's not gonna just go in place. Plus we got the window here, and these windows have been changed to gas filled storm windows at some point, and they're okay. I'll probably replace them in the future, but because of that, there's a gap here, which isn't unusual really, but the header is interesting. Look at that, like it's like sticking out, and I've hammered on it. I didn't take a sledgehammer to it, but I think it'll be okay. Drywall might not be perfectly straight, but it should be all right. Now when I'm trimming drywall, I score mine. I don't use rotary tools or the oscillating tools, because all they do is make a mess and they tear up the drywall. So like when you score drywall, you can kind of see where the blade stopped, and then I was able to pop it apart. All you do is you score it on the front, you go on the back side, and you just hit it with your hand and fold it out, and then cut the back side of the paper that coats the back. And you know, when I'm marking it myself, I usually do this. I'll go up every foot or so and make a mark, and then I come back with a straight edge and run me a line down. And this is just, again, this is the way I like doing it. You could use like chalk. You can use a chalk line. You can do a lot of different things, but that's the way I do it. And I'm using this lightweight gypsum board. It's just easier to handle, but it's not as good as the thick stuff, but it's also cheaper. So, you know, always a trade-off. But, you know, in this room, or in this whole house, really, we're going from what is essentially kindling, that daggone old panel board, to drywall, which is rated for be able to extend fire up to a certain amount of time. So if you think about it, we're buying a little bit of time if we ever have a house fire, hopefully to wake up and get out of here, you know, depending on where the fire is. It's just a newer material, so we're updating the house. Now, if the wood paneling didn't have like paper all over it, the wallpaper, we could actually, you know, reuse it, because all it is really is just a flat surface, and some of them have little lines on it, like ornate lines, to make it look like fake wood, or make it look like wood, even though it is wood. Whatever, you know what I mean. You can fill those in and actually make a smooth wall out of it, and then use wallpaper or whatever you want to do. But I'm going with drywall myself, and it adds a little bit of an insulation factor too to the exterior walls. Now on the interior wall, you might notice I put in insulation, and that's mainly, and it's the cheap R13. This is just for sound dampening, right? People are stomping through the hallway, kids are being loud in the room, whatever. It kind of kills some of the sound. You know, you got two kids with rooms beside each other. They don't want to be annoying each other with noise and all that other mess. So you can get sound deadening material, but this is cheaper. And I had some, so I'm just going with that. And then we check up on our mudding job from earlier. You can kind of see the white or part around the edges is dry, and in the middle has got like a little different darker hue to it. Here's a good example. Right here you can see it looks like a different color in the middle, and that's the part that hasn't dried yet. So you don't need to buy that more expensive like pink stuff to know when your stuff's dry. I've never had that problem. It's common sense, really. And if anything, if you're working on something and it's cold and not warm, what you should probably do is let it sit overnight anyway. And that's usually what we end up doing, because we're doing it ourselves. It's not like we're a crew coming through knocking out a whole house or something. So this will work just good for us. All right, this is what I was talking about. See, I made me a line all the way down, and you just go in the back and you pop it, and now there's a crease, and we can cut that crease out and it'll release the whole piece. I use this. I'm just able to keep a steadier hand and come all the way down. All right, so I meant to show how you can mark your drywall after you put it up if you're not sure where your stud is. So pull some tape measure. Most of them have these markings where it'll show you where everywhere 16 inches falls, and you'll see it's lining up with this side of the front side of the stud. So you notice where the stud starts. So if we go over here, there's a stud here, which I don't need any screws in. And then on this piece right here that has no screws in the middle, there should be a stud right here. So if I put a screw in there, it should hit a stud. And I can pull that and mark in a few places along this drywall and put a couple screws in here just to keep it nice and snug. And now you can see it was perfect right on, because you don't see any holes where I had to walk over to one direction or the other. And I was able to get a couple in the stud, and it looked good. All right, last video today, I think. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to finish the drywall and get all the spackle in, put a little space heater in there, let it get nice and dry, do a sand later tonight. I'll try to get a little video in there, and then I'll put our last coating of spackle and let the kids do the final sand and start painting, and then we'll be able to move on to flooring.